Point.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Joshua. I'm sure you all know. My topic was racial and ethnic relations. And before I get too far into it, I'm going to for an introduction, I'll let you know why I chose it. My father is African American, and my mother is half white and half Mexican American. Me being a combination of the three, I've been able to fit in pretty much anywhere I go with any group. It's pretty easy for me to relate and to connect with different groups of people easily. And I haven't really experienced too much discrimination or prejudice in my life, but I have seen what it looks like for others to experience this, and it's not fun or easy for them to go through. It really interests me because it raises questions as to why people would react this way or treat others as if they're better than them. One experience that I have had was pretty minor yet still infuriating. I went to the movies with one of my little brothers, and we were sitting down in the movie enjoying it, and randomly a worker from the theater comes in and he asks me to see my ticket, and I pull out what I thought was my ticket, but it was just a receipt because I paid with a card. And so I handed it to him, and he said, "Well, this is just the receipt. I need to see your ticket." I was like, "Isn't that the same thing?" He said, "No, I need to see your ticket." So still disturbing the movie, I had to stand up, reach into both my pockets, and pretty much cause a disturbance and find the small ticket. So I handed it to him, and he was like, "All right, thank you." And I sat back down, and I was pretty frustrated. I didn't feel like talking to him anymore. And he tried to hand me back the ticket, and I'm like, "You can keep it." And he hands it to my little brother. Anyway, I see him move on, and he goes to another African-American person, and he asks him the same question, and security comes in and ends up kicking him out along with his friend. All that happened because somebody snuck in and didn't pay for their ticket. They just came through the exit. I'm sure you've seen somebody do this before. I've done it before, but not this time. And it was just shocking and angering to me that they would come to me and accuse me of doing that without having any information about me or just pretty much basically off my skin color. That was just a tough experience to go through, and like I said, it was minor, so I can only imagine how others must feel when they experience things like this. Now, prejudice versus discrimination. A lot of people get these confused. I've done so myself. Prejudice is an attitude, whereas discrimination is an act. With prejudice, it's a prejudgment of a person or a group of people, and this can be negative or positive. If you have a prejudgment about a certain group, you can already have preconceived thoughts that they're going to be great, wonderful, and that can lead you to treat them differently, and the same is the opposite. If you have a negative view about them, then you can treat them as if they're lower than you. Discrimination is just the act of treating someone or a group unfairly. So the prejudice usually leads to a discriminant act if it's a negative prejudice. Stereotypes and ethnocentrism. Stereotypes came up a lot in my interviews, and so that's why I thought it was big to put this in here. Stereotypes are generalizations of what people are like. So if I meet a soccer player and remember my experience with them, then I can base a stereotype on the whole soccer team off of that one person and say that they are all like this. With ethnocentrism, it's an attitude, so a prejudice that my group's ways are right and your group's ways are wrong automatically. With ethnocentrism, dominant groups usually have this to justify their higher position in society and greater share of resources. They feel like what they've been doing in their history has been right all along, and so they deserve to have a better life. It could also help with prevent cognitive dissonance. I'm sure all of you know what that is. It's where two contradicting cognitives exist and cause tension in the mind. So to relieve that or to prevent it, a dominant group might have ethnocentrism and just say, "Oh, well, it's okay because my group is right." Why is this a problem? People with prejudiced beliefs against one another, they are capable of coexisting peacefully. It doesn't automatically have to be a problem just because I have a preconceived thought about a certain group. It becomes a problem whenever deprivation of rights occur. So whenever somebody's treated unequally or not, or don't have full access to the rights that they've been born with. Today it exists in many ways. Prejudice and discriminant acts are often based on appearance, such as age or weight, race and ethnicity, sex, disability, income, education, lifestyle, and religious or political beliefs. Thoughts of racial superiority can lead to seeing other races as lower. In our history and systems of psychology class, we watched a video on eugenics. Eugenics is where one race they believe that their race is superior to all the others, and they try selective breeding, and they try to eliminate all other races pretty much by breeding only their race. Now I'm going to play a video for you that shows another minor example of discrimination or prejudice, and just, even though it's kind of funny and minor, imagine how it could be like on a larger scale.
Of hair follicles in the brow region. And ever since my personal discovery of tweezers between the 11th and 12th grades, I've long suspected that people without unibrow actually get treated better by the general population. So, as a firm believer in the scientific method, I decided to test out this hypothesis.
Can everybody hear?
So I went to my Hollywood makeup artist buddy, Dennis, and he hooked me up with a killer unibrow. And then I went out and I would engage people and then just ask them an open-ended question. And generally when I would walk away, things like this would happen a lot. But as a control for the experiment, I also went out with no unibrow to the exact same locations, wearing the exact same clothes, asking the exact same questions. You know what a good place to eat around here? So for example, this is response with no unibrow.
But it's really good.
Well, thank you. And then here's a response with the unibrow. You know what a good place to eat around here?
I don't want to.
Now, this represents a relatively small sample size of about 200 people, but here's what I found. Without the unibrow, the average response was about 33 words long. But with the unibrow, the average response was only 16 words long. So we have to accept our hypothesis that unibrow discrimination is in fact very real, which is crazy because that basically means people will be more than twice as willing to engage in a conversation with you based strictly on whether or not you have a well-established gap of hair between here and here on your face. So another interesting observation was in cases where I had the unibrow, a person by themselves would respond with an average of 18 words. But if it was a group, the average number of words from the entire group was only 14. And if you do have prominent brow hair, one final bit of advice is if you approach a group of teenage girls, 35% of the time when you walk away, they will try and discreetly take your picture without realizing they are being filmed by 3 separate cameras. Here I am, and here I am about 10 seconds away from landing in the Instagram feed of 900 of her closest friends. So, according to the data, having a unibrow will in fact negatively influence your social interactions with other people.
Ah, I knew it! Look away! I'm the idiot! I knew there was a reason I've been living with another man for 40 years.
That's why? I'd always just kind of assumed. Never mind. The point is you can do something about this.
Now, you promised this won't hurt, right? Ah! 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 Hey, not bad.
So again, that was just a small scale of what takes place every day. Now, unibrows aren't something that's talked about or something we have strong feelings about, but things like skin color, age, weight, etc. are all things that we notice and have strong opinions about. So imagine what happens when these strong opinions lead to prejudices and then on to discriminant acts. Inequalities with opportunities such as at work or school, with interviewers at work might refuse a job to somebody just because of something they don't like about them. to other things in everyday life, such as your service at a restaurant or even at a fast food place. So, what's been done to help? The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was put into place to prevent discrimination. This prohibits discrimination in voting, public accommodations, federally supported programs, and federally supported schools and things like that. Another thing that's been put into place is Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is empowered to investigate complaints of discrimination. So these are all results of people taking to the law for protection, and they've been very helpful and very beneficial. In the interviews, you'll see that although those things were beneficial, they have not stopped it completely. My first interviewee was Lucinda Segura. She's a Mexican-American woman and has lived in the same house in East Dallas for the last 35 years. She's also my grandma. During this time in her house, she's seen the neighborhood change in a lot of ways. Some of those examples are how houses have been torn down or rebuilt, the face of the neighborhood has changed, and the population also. She's seen everything from neighbors having verbal arguments to gang violence and shootings. And a lot of these were based off race. She, again, is Mexican, and whenever she first moved there, the neighborhood was predominantly Mexican. But after going through so much change, then problems arise. And I asked her what she thought was the cause of the different problems or the discrimination in the neighborhood, and she thought it was stereotypes. She gave an example that a Mexican could have a bad experience with one African American and then base their judgments on the entire group. This causes a disliking for that group and then acts against that disliking. Janet Sharpless, she is an African American lady who has worked at recreation centers all over the Dallas area. She really loved working with kids. She thought it was great to see the diversity of children getting along and sharing new experiences together. But she also saw the negative side of the diversity. Not everybody was happy that it was so diverse. She said this was evidenced by a lot of the parents complaining about who their child was playing with or joining in activities with, which is surprising to hear about in today's world. When I asked her what she thought the causes were, she said she thought it came from the parents. So whenever she saw the parents come in and complain, she would observe the kids and they could display some of the same attitudes and beliefs that the parents would. She thought that was real interesting and believed that the parents really had an influence on children's upbringing and the attitudes that are instilled in them. Eric Miles is a basketball coach at Ed Vanston Middle School in Mesquite. He was my middle school coach, and the reason I chose to interview him was because of his background. He's a white male that grew up in a rough neighborhood, meaning it was a lower class area with low graduation rates and high crime rates. This was a big issue to him because he explained to me that race meant a lot to him whenever he was growing up. In middle school and high school, race was pretty much everything where he was. It really affected how kids saw him and treated him right away. One example is whenever he would try to make friends, kids would just see that he was white and assume that he was from a different social class, and so they wouldn't let him play with them or they wouldn't interact with him really. Sometimes they would even make fun of him. When I asked him what he thought caused the discrimination, he said that it was social class. He said that one reason could be social class, not necessarily has to be. Kids automatically thought he was in a better financial status than they were, so they just weren't accepting to him. The preconceived notions, thoughts, bring along different prejudices about the different social classes. He thought this was a huge deal and wished it was different, but he wasn't regretting his experience. It just hurt, and I could tell in his voice whenever I was talking to him. So, for some solutions for today, they all agreed on pretty much the same thing. Thought it was exposure and interaction that could help. They all felt that if each race was exposed to the other situations, then they could better understand why they act the way they do and help everybody get along. An open mind would be had whenever approached by somebody else, and not having any automatic thoughts that, oh, I'm better than them because I'm not in the same situation. Having more interaction can help ease the tension between the groups. When they're around each other more, that helps them work together better. Ms. Sharpless said that she got to see this take place with the children. She was the only one that gave a practical solution because she was in the best position. She said, looking back, she would have had a weekly or monthly get-together for the parents to have a chance to socialize and enjoy each other as the kids did on a daily basis. The best solution I thought there was taken to the Bible. In Scripture, Mark chapter 12, verses 29 through 31, it says, this is Jesus talking about the most important commandments. The most important one, answered Jesus, is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment than these. I think that plays big in everyday interaction. That can really help. The way you approach somebody can really take effect and lead on to future occurrences and future interactions. That's all I have.
Could you talk about cognitive dissonance again, and sort of give us an example of what that would look like?
Okay, cognitive dissonance is two thoughts contradicting each other, and whenever you have those, they cause tension. So if I have an opinion about smoking, and I say smoking is terrible, I see what it does to people's health, but then I find myself smoking, then I'm having tension. Like, I know it's bad, but I'm still doing it, so why is this happening? And this causes uneasiness in, like, my mind. So I would have to find a way to justify my action and probably change my attitude or my action in order to relieve that tension.
Right. So maybe like somebody would say, well, that happens to other people. Cancer happens to other people. It's not going to happen to me.
Right.
Maybe not even say it, just in our mind we do that.
Right.
Like teenagers that think they're Teflon, nothing's going to stick. They're Superman.
Yeah.
They hear all the bad stuff, but that's not, you never think it's about you. It's always about the person.
An example that would relate to this, going back to ethnocentrism, would be, I know everybody's supposed to be born equal, but yet me and my people group are inflicting harm on another group or keeping them under. And the way I justify that to relieve the tension would be the ethnocentrism. Well, my group's ways are right and theirs are wrong, so they deserve it.
Good example. Any other questions?
Have you ever experienced like any, I guess, like, negative thing in dating?
Nothing too extreme. I mean, I've seen people give looks, and I've wondered if, like, what they're thinking. I can't assume that they were thinking like negative thoughts about me being with somebody of a different race, but that's pretty much been it, as far as I know.
Just a comment, when you talked about, I know you're from Dallas, we had JFK's, they went over that it was all in the news about, they reviewed his assassination in Dallas, and there was huge prejudice in Dallas back then. I mean, it was probably the same here in Oklahoma, or probably everywhere, compared to now.
Right.
But a lot of the justification they said that somebody had theoretically given to his death was because he was a civil rights guy. He and his brother were big in, disturbing the South.
Yeah.
And trying to get integration in place and all that stuff. And so, but we don't know why they really shot him, but
right.
But that was be one reason why you could come up with, because he was really unpopular with people who thought we should remain racially separate.
Yeah.
And Sharpless, who was she?
She was a lady that worked at recreation centers all over.
She sounds like a building bridges person. She's
Yeah, she was a great person.
Okay, anything else? Oh, I can't reach it.